Hello everyone and welcome to When Tomorrow Comes. This is Iceni's regular look at the world of planning and development. My name is Dan Jestico, I'm Iceni's Director of Futures, and today we're going to be talking about self and custom built homes. I'm joined by a great panel today. We have James Bompas, who authored this morning's email. How are you, James?
Afternoon, Dan. Good to see you.
See you too. We also have a guest this week on the panel, who's Graham Cox from Kind & Co. Graham, how are you?
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Tell us a bit more about what you do with Kind & Co.
Kind & Co are a medium-sized contractor based in North East London. We build homes for various organisations, predominantly the public sector, councils and housing associations, medium-sized contracts, but we try to be creative. Not only for our own benefit to grow the business, but also because we're passionate about getting more homes built for people.
Brilliant. Oh, glad to have you on the panel. We've also got some of our other ICE colleagues. Greg Boyd. Hello, Greg.
Hi, Dan. How's it going?
Good, mate. Good. And our When Tomorrow Comes regular, Ashley Cook. How are you?
Hi, Dan. I'm good, thanks.
Good. As always, when we do When Tomorrow Comes, we'll pass over to our author of this week's article, James, to give us a bit of a summary about what he was discussing.
Thanks, Dan. So, as Dan said, this week was about custom-built housing, and the reason that I wanted to talk about custom-built housing is that I'm in the process of submitting an application at the moment for 27 custom-built homes, and it goes in tomorrow. And I'm surprised that more people aren't doing custom-built. There's the policy basis there for it now in the MPPF. We've got a Custom and Self-Build Act. It's heavily referenced in white paper. So there's no reason why we can't be doing more. And it's, as a project, I find that custom and self-build schemes are far easier to sell both to the local community and the decision makers than traditional build. And I think that's because you tend to spend longer having discussions around design. Sustainable development tends to be discussed at greater length than a traditional build. And it's something that the UK doesn't have a great deal of at the moment.
Interesting. Okay, Graham, what's your experience on this from a contractor's point of view? Why aren't we seeing more self and custom build homes?
Yeah, very interesting. Europe does it, makes it work. Why don't we? My view, I think, goes back, oh gosh, what are we now? 80 years towards the end of the Second World War. And I think the way that we set up how to rebuild Britain after that terrible event, when people needed jobs, people needed homes. So the marriage of the two was, okay, let's get local authorities building housing estates. Let's build some new towns. Let's get contractors building private homes. Let's open up the space and deliver it. The tradesmen all went back to work for building companies, and it was fine. We built housing estate after housing estate. Love them or hate them. Many we hate and they're being cleared now, but many are perfectly good. But that model might have worked, I think, in 1945 and through to 1960 or 70, perhaps. But now the world is very different. Key criteria are much more complex in submitting planning applications. And I think that the demands that are made upon people keen to provide custom build opportunities are too great. The system doesn't differentiate enough between the nature of and type of application. I find that enough as a small to medium-sized builder looking to deliver 10, 20, 30 unit schemes. The hoops I have to jump through remain the same as if I was delivering 1,000 houses on a scheme. And it burdens me, it weighs me down, and it slows the process. I'm very happy to fulfill the requirements that a planning authority quite correctly makes of me, of ensuring biodiversity, sustainability, engineering satisfactory solutions and so on. But having to deliver all that in a very time-consuming planning process is difficult enough. If you then look to that where you're now taking a 20-unit scheme and dividing that into 20 individual projects, it's now 20 times the paperwork. We've got to find a streamline somewhere.
Yeah, Ashley, is there more that local authorities can do to support self and custom build, as Graham suggests? I mean, what potential sort of streamlines could they apply to the process?
I wonder if it's more there's something that sort of government can do more, because I think that anything that local authorities need to do, I think it needs to come from the top, really. Whilst I was at MHCLG, I worked a little bit on some of the small and medium, the policies that were meant to help small and medium-sized builders. And whilst, you know, that's not the same as self-build, I take what Graham's saying there about that, you know, there's lots of complexities to the projects he has to go through, but actually it can get even more complicated when you're talking about self-build. And I do wonder if sort of the people who are making the policies know enough or understand enough about the challenges that are faced by self and custom builders, and if there are the policies in place to allow them to bring forward the homes that they want to build. And I think that there are a lot of barriers to it that probably just puts people off from the get-go. You know, it's almost considered as not even an option because it's just too complicated. And maybe we do have to look to some European countries to understand why is it there it's much more popular. Is it a cultural thing, or is it that there are systems in place that mean that it is practical and plausible for people to genuinely come forward with their own proposals and bring it forward in a streamlined system? There will be a solution to it, but you know, as with the UK, it's sometimes a bit more complicated than needs be.
Okay. So, Greg, is there demand out there? Do people actually want to build their own homes?
There's a lot of demand across the country, but I would say it does vary by area. And one of the most interesting stats I've pulled up is that a whopping 42% of people who wanted to build their own home didn't know that a register existed in the local community. Only 9% of people last year who actually built their own home knew there was a register. So although we have the Act that requires local authorities to hold a register, there's clearly an issue about publication of that register and the marketing, which I think is the kind of gap between how, if the councils have been given a clear direction to travel down to get towards more self-build. Back in November 2011, the government introduced laying the foundations, which kind of set out the initial step towards more self-build homes. And even in the last planning white paper, they've reintroduced that again. So there's been 9 years of solid government support for this. But ultimately, it comes down to, are the councils doing enough to get their register out there? Are they doing enough to get people interested and keep the campaign moving? The government can only do so much. And there's a couple of other interesting stats. 1 in 10 people are aware of the register. So that suggests that we're talking about 10 times the amount of demand that could be on a council's register that's going missing. And actually, NACSPA, the Self-Build Association, last year they found that local councils were actually trying to drive down demand on their register prior to the first base period being completed. So just for people's information, at the end of the first base period, councils have 3 years to grant permissions for the plots that are on that first base period. So last year was the first year that councils had to grant permissions, and before that they were trying to drive down the number on the register. So there's a number of ways that we're doing that. They were introducing local connection tests. They were taking people off the register if they hadn't been in touch for a couple of years because they assumed they no longer needed a plot. And they were also introducing a fee, sometimes quite extortionate fees up to £200 to access the register. So that's not getting on the back of local authorities because I personally do a lot of work with them, but I think there's an education point to take from the government, take perspectives from developers and landowners, get that back to local authorities and get a bit more of a holistic approach, I think, to development.
Yeah. James, I mean, this all sounds very stressful. I've seen grand designs, it looks like an absolute nightmare. Why would anyone want to build their own home? What are the benefits?
So the main benefit is the ability to customise your house. So what I'm finding on the schemes that I'm working on is people will change the bedroom layout. People will plan for a home office. As I said earlier, people are very keen on the sustainability components, and the scheme that we're submitting later in the week will be zero carbon, and it can be more affordable. If you look at the plot prices on Rightmove or something like that, then you can see that the plot prices are typically less than £200,000. And if you're then factoring on 150 in build cost, it's an affordable way to get a home.
Okay, Graham, I mean, is there a way in which we can kind of use modern technology to incentivise the take-up of custom built homes, things like modular solutions? Would that work on custom built projects?
It's interesting. I think for some people it would, particularly if they were kind of call it collectives, small groups of people, if that could be encouraged. Simplifying construction has got to make it more effective. But, you know, I think in a certain way, everyone would, or perhaps we all, and I'll include myself, would tend to think, oh yeah, we should be modular constructing and we should be system building. But actually, the more and more I would get into the process, I think I and many people would realise that they don't really want that. What they want is grand designs, very individual houses. And as James was just inferring, people want to shuffle around bedrooms and offices and en suites and open living and closed rooms and so on downstairs. So I'm not sure it's really going to add a great deal. I think if you can get to the stage where somebody's on site and doing it, whatever they want to do is just great. If they want to do CLT, let them do CLT. Standard panelised timber, let them do it. If actually they fancy learning how to lay a brick or a block, get up there and do that too. We find as a builder that really cost-wise, it's not much difference. As long as you know where you're going when you start and you stick to that plan, don't try changing halfway through. I don't think the system has got much of construction has got much to do with it. I mean, one thing I would say, I was just musing while I was listening there. Back in the 1980s, before you lot were even born, I was working for a small developer in leafy Sevenoaks, and we used to build one house here, two houses there, and maybe 10 houses here and 10 houses there, but he was quite a small builder. I can distinctly remember building a bungalow in Sevenoaks, and the process was my boss organised an architect to get some drawings done, which he did, which I helped him manage, which we then popped into the planning office. I met the planner out on site one morning. He had the drawing in his hand. We looked at the site. He looked at the drawings. He said, right, well, you've got to do this, Graham. You need to do that. Make sure you do the other. I'm not quite sure that roof is right. Would you get it lowered a bit? You can imagine the sort of comments. He said, do all that. Come back to me with a revised drawing and I'll put it through for consent. That's the kind of process we want to get to. He was quite content that as long as he said, make sure you do this, make sure you do that, that we as reliable builders would deliver it. He would check on it afterwards during construction or whatever, or his building control would check on it. I think if you want a smoothing of the construction process, it's through that route that we need to look.
Okay. I mean, and how is this likely to be received by local residents and local authorities? Is it a more attractive proposition, do you think, Greg? Will sort of neighbours be more keen to have self-build on their in their neighbourhood than traditional house building? Is there a perception issue?
My experience is definitely yes. They are more keen to have self-build, and I think people can relate to that a lot more. If it's someone in the local community designing their own house, they are much more likely to support that than a house builder coming in with their typical, as you like to say, sort of flat back houses or their standard models. I think if they know that a member of their communities get access to a local house, affordable, they can design it themselves, then they're much more likely to be supportive.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up. I mean, clearly there's huge potential in the market. There's a bit more that government can do to support the industry as well. So I'd like to thank our panelists for today, Ashley, Greg, James and Graham. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope to see you again soon.